All right, we'll give it just a second here for everybody to finish trickling in before we go ahead and get started. So stick with us for just a minute or so. All right, looks like we got about everybody that was in the lobby in, so go ahead and get started. Let's see. Right. Just to make sure, Nora, you can see that. Oops, wrong.
Yes, it's in like notes format though.
Swap it in. How's that look?
Yeah, that looks right.
All right, awesome. We'll go ahead and get started then. Thanks everybody for being here. It looks like we have a pretty good turnout, so welcome. My name is Michael Prosnitz. I'm the program coordinator for the Office of Strategy, Science, and Technology within the New Mexico Economic Development Department, and I'm joined here by my director, Nora Sackett. And this is the informational webinar for the SBIR and STTR matching grant run through our office and the New Mexico Economic Development Department. So let's just go ahead and get into it. The goal of this grant is to assist early stage technology companies with commercializing their technologies and continuing to do business in New Mexico. Funds for this grant are intended to be used for business development expenses, and I'll have a slide later detailing exactly what that means. And then lastly, we have some prioritized sectors for this grant, those being aerospace, biosciences, advanced computing, water technologies, and advanced energy. This is slightly different than how we've done things in the past for this grant, where normally you would have to be in one of these industries to be applicable to apply for this grant. However, this year we are accepting applications for any industry, but prioritizing these 5 industries listed below. We'll talk quickly about the eligibility for the grant. So in order to be eligible, your company must be headquartered in New Mexico with at least 60% of its payroll in New Mexico. You must be in good standing with the state. And then you must have an active federal SBIR or STTR phase 1 or phase 2 at the time of submitting an application, or be within 3 months of phase 1 having ended with intentions of applying for a phase 2. That second part is a little bit different again than what we've done in the past. We understand that the cycle of this grant doesn't always end up matching well with the cycle of SBIR and STTR applications. So we're trying to be a little more flexible in that regard. So we're adding that second component as well. Next, as I mentioned before, we are accepting applications from all New Mexico for-profit companies that have an SBIR or STTR listed in the bullet point before this. All are eligible to apply, but we have a prioritization on aerospace, biosciences, advanced computing, water technologies, and lastly, advanced energy. And then the last eligibility criteria is that you must certify that at least 51% of activities conducted under your SBIR or STTR will be performed in the state of New Mexico, and that 31% of the state funds for this grant will be performed or used in the state of New Mexico. We'll talk quickly about the award amounts, one of the most important things that I'm sure everyone's most curious about. For a phase 1, we are awarding up to $50,000 for awardees. This is an increase from $25,000 last year. And for phase 2s, we are awarding up to $100,000, similar to last year. And as a reference, last year we were able to award 7 awards total for fiscal year 24. And although I can't go into details, we are hoping to award more applications than that for fiscal year 25 this time around. All right, now I'll get into the funding use that I had mentioned earlier. Again, funds are intended to be used for business development purposes. So some examples of that are intellectual property assessment, patent filing, outside lab testing and validation, regulatory assessment and certifications, meeting with customers, partners, and investors, attending trade shows. A caveat here that no more than 10% of the total awarded funds can be put towards attending trade shows. And then lastly, market research and data acquisition. This isn't an all-encompassing list. These are just kind of the most common things we see. So you can use it on other things, for example, like website development or something like that. As far as ineligible funding uses go, we have payroll expenses, research and development, materials or supplies over $100, alcohol, food, or drugs, and then laboratory or business equipment. Again, focus here being on business development purpose for eligible funding uses to offset the research and development that is funded through the SBIR. And I want to mention real quick one caveat here, not a caveat, but one explanation of the payroll. Payroll being you cannot put the funds towards paying, for example, a salary or payroll for someone internal to the company. However, for the eligible funding uses, you can use funds to hire a contractor outside of the company to perform those for you. All right, let's talk about the application itself. So the application is broken up into 5 sections. The first one being company information. This section is just going to ask kind of some basic information on your company and then the person applying. Pretty straightforward there. The second section is company eligibility, going over some of those eligibility criteria I talked about on a previous slide. There's then a section on your federal SBIR and STTR, supplying us some information on that. And then after that, we have the actual proposal for the application, where you're going to fill out some of the questions that will be evaluated by our TRC board, our Technology Research, Collaborative. One quick thing here, there is a 250 word limit for the answers to these proposal questions. I believe there's 8 of them. In the Salesforce application itself, it does not work in word limits. We use that just because it's a little bit easier to convey and get across. But technically, the limit is actually 1,250 characters, which translates to 250 words. So if you are about at that 250 word limit point and you're noticing it won't let you submit that answer, make sure you're doing 1,250 characters. And then the last section is the certification section. And this is just a quick section to certify and sign that you understand or that everything you have told us and supplied us in the application is true to your knowledge. As far as uploads for the application go, we require 3 different documents. The first is a letter of good standing. There are clear instructions on how to request this letter of good standing within the grant manual. So if you haven't yet checked that out, make sure you check that out. It's at the bottom of page 3. And there's also instructions on the grant application itself on where to go to get instructions on this. It is a little bit different than it's been done in previous years. I think we found out in our last grant that about a year ago this changed. So now when you're requesting a letter of good standing, you can do so through the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue portal. And once you request the letter of good standing, it'll show up in your portal within like a minute tops. So it's pretty quick there. And if you don't see the option to request a letter of good standing, there were a couple reasons for that. One being you might not be signed into your administrator account. So if you are having issues with that, just reach out to me. I'll have my email at the end and we can get that sorted out for you. The next document is the Notice of Award, the NOA for your SBIR or STTR Phase 1 or Phase 2. This just lets us know that you do have an active SBIR, STTR, or are within that 3-month time frame and gives us the dates of that grant. And then lastly, there is a upload in the proposal section, the last question, to upload a document that details the tasks, milestones, proposed costs, and timeline of your application. One thing to keep in mind here is that the state fiscal year ends in June every year. So this grant will run from about when we award it in mid-December, December 2024 to June 2025. So when you are putting together this document, keep that 7-month time frame of December 2024 to June 2025 in mind when you're putting together the document. All right, let's go into a little bit on the evaluation now. So again, I mentioned previously that all applications that are eligible will be evaluated by our TRC board. That stands for Technology Research Collaborative Board. And this is what they're going to be evaluating your application based on. So the first is just kind of some general topics about your proposal, like your problem statement, unique value proposition, your business plan, etc. The next is going to be the technology itself and its market readiness, along with its potential for commercialization going forward. The next is potential risks and the competitive landscape. Then financial forecast, proposed use of funds, the expertise of the team, and lastly, because this is a state grant, the potential to develop the tax base in New Mexico and create jobs going forward. So as you're filling out that proposal section, make sure you keep these in mind, as this is how you'll be evaluated. All right, and some quick information on if you are awarded, kind of what that process looks like. The first thing you'll need to do is sign a grant agreement with the state of New Mexico, with the Economic Development Department. This grant agreement details the responsibilities of the grantee, the awardee, and the grantor, the Economic Development Department. Next, you'll be required to submit a State of New Mexico W-9. This will get you set up within our system as a vendor so that we can actually get the funds to you. You'll need to submit a final report within 30 days of that June 2025 deadline of when grants will close, or whenever you do close your grant, if it closes early, along with kind of a middle of the way report to give us updates on progress and milestones. Lastly, we require kind of a description of any follow-on funding that you receive up to 1 year after the close of your grant with the award or during the process of the award as well. This one's a bit important because it gives us some very valuable information to potentially take to legislature to get more funding in the future. So if you guys like this funding and want to see it potentially increase in the future, make sure you keep up with that if you're awarded. And then lastly, a little bit on the actual payment for the grant. So the grant is paid out in a cost reimbursement basis in the form of 4 tranches. So that'll be 25%, 25%, 25%, and then 25% of the awarded funds. That first 25% is awarded upfront for the grant. So technically that one is not on a cost reimbursement basis, but going forward after that first 25%, it will be. So keep that in mind. All right, we'll finish up here with the timeline for the grant. Applications opened October 23rd, 2024. That is a week ago today. And they will be open until November 13th, 2024. That is 2 weeks from today, a Wednesday, by 5 p.m. That is a hard close deadline at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So please make sure you get in your applications prior to that. Even if you have your application open and try to submit after that, it won't let you. And again, please, 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 if possible, try to get it in early and not last second, just because if any computer issues happen and you aren't able to submit your application and it's even 2-3 minutes over that 5 p.m. deadline, it's a hard stop again on the back end. So we won't be able to accept applications past that. As I mentioned, all eligible applications will be reviewed by the Technology Research Collaborative Board after applications close on November 13th. And we're expecting to make decisions about the award and awardees about mid-November. So about 1 month after the close of the application on November 13th. And one more time for good measure, the awarded projects must be completed by June 30th, 2025. So keep that in mind as you're putting your application together. It's not a 1 year long 1 year long grant period. It is a 7-month long grant period, technically, if things get started middle of December. All right. And then that is it for the presentation. I have my email and my phone number up here, so feel free to ask any questions. But we'll go ahead and open it up to questions now. So you can either type your question in the chat. I don't think, looks like maybe we have couple here. I forgot to mention at the beginning. Sorry. Yeah, you can ask your questions in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, you should be able to unmute yourself and ask a question as well. So let's take a look. We'll go to Vignesh first. Are you able to unmute yourself, Vignesh?
Sorry. Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
Yes. Most of it was clear to me. I just had two questions regarding the grant. So I wanted to check if a company hypothetically gets awarded the New Mexico Small Business Technology Grant, which was earlier to this. Are they also eligible to be awarded this grant, or does that would they become ineligible because of the previous award?
No, the previous grant, the Science and Technology Business Startup Grant, does not, if you are awarded that grant, does not make you ineligible for applying to this grant. So you can apply for both of them.
Great. And I had a second question where you said 51% of the activities from the SBIR fund should be in New Mexico, and 31% of the funds should be spent in New Mexico. So does the 31%, let's assume we have a person who's working remotely from a different state. Is the payment made to that person from the grant considered outside of this 31%?
Yeah, nor correct me if I'm wrong, but it would. Any funds that are technically going outside of the state would count towards that. But if you want to give me more information offline, we can maybe discuss that in more detail.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right. Looks like I'll move to the first question we had in the chat next. Attending trade shows but not exhibiting to do customer discovery is fully findable, not limited to 10%. Yes, if you're not presenting at the trade shows, then yes, but there's a little bit of, again, we would require some more details. If you would want to send us that offline or later when you're awarded, if you were awarded, we could get into it. It's mostly the trade show one is for presenting at trade shows, but if you're doing customer discovery or meeting with investors and that just happens to be at a trade show, then that could be just counted as travel.
But just to add to that, but it would need to be like, you would really need to be concrete about that, not just like, oh, I'm wandering around and talking to exhibitors that align with me. Like, if you're saying it's for customer meetings, customer discovery, that really needs to be genuinely what it's for and to be documented.
Right. So in that, I mentioned the kind of halfway report and then the final report, you would include information on that detailing, explicitly what it was for and maybe like who you talked to, connections made, et cetera, just to give us that detailed information. And then I guess we'll just kind of go back and forth between the hands raised and the questions. How about Cisco?
Hey, Michael, you might have mentioned it, but is there a funding cap or a number of awards that are per county or anything like that? I mean, what are the I think you said there were 4 awardees last year?
So there were 7 awardees last year. There isn't a cap as far as kind of region within New Mexico goes. Obviously, we do have a funding cap internally that is kind of behind the scenes. But we are essentially kind of depends on the number of applications we get for the funding cap that we have for how many we will give out. And it might be, we might award less awards at the higher range of that 50,000 or 100,000, or maybe a little bit lower on that range to award more awards, just kind of depending at what we get.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in here just to clarify a little bit. It is dependent on available funding on the back end. Michael's not trying to be purposely diffuse, like, that can depend on various elements, both of how many applications we receive and can we put this in there, and that all happens on the back end. But there is no geographic quota or anything like that.
Okay. No, here in Chaves County, I have two entrepreneurs that this might be a good fit for. I just don't know how competitive they'd be. I'll share it with them, but I wanted to give them some kind of, expectation management on that.
Definitely. Yeah. And feel free to, connect them with Michael to kind of talk more about what their proposal would look like.
Yeah, happy to talk to them about both this grant and potentially, any other resources, any other way we can help. So feel free to send them my way. All right, we'll just get the last hand raised now, and then we'll hit the questions in the chat. So Michael.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And great presentation, you guys. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we would need to be in an active SBIR phase 1 right now, which we're not. So that makes us ineligible, as I understand it.
That's correct. Unfortunately, yes. If it does come around next year when you do have an active phase, if you have an active phase 1, if you're applying for one, then you would be eligible at that point. But unfortunately for this cycle, you wouldn't.
Thank
And
you
just
for that clarity.
to clarify, Michael talked about this earlier, but either be in an active one or have been selected for one and it starts within 3 months of now, or had one within 3 months of now.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, let me scroll up on the chat a little bit. So we're in the process of submitting an SBIR phase 1 application in November 6th. When is the next OSST cycle to apply for this grant? So this grant has a yearly cycle, so it would be kind of same time, about October of 2025 would be the next cycle for this grant. But as Nora mentioned, depending on the award, I know they take a very long time from when the award is awarded. So it might not be reasonable or realistic this time around, but if you do get any more information prior to the grant closing, maybe reach out. And then, yes, you do need an active phase 1 or phase 2 SBIR or STTR, or be within that 3-month time frame we discussed. Yes, the 250 word limit is for each question. So I think there's one question on the amount you're requesting, one question to upload the proposal document that I discussed, and then there are 6 questions, each with a 250 word limit, or technically 1,250 character limit for each of those questions, not combined. Will this slide deck be on the website? The slide deck itself will not be, but we will be uploading the recording of this webinar to the website probably by the next day or 2 at the latest.
And also, I'll just add, every bit of information that Michael went over in this slide deck and presentation is in the grant manual. So I highly recommend read the grant manual. It has all of this information in it.
And I'll real quick just put a link in the chat to the webpage for this. Where's that? For this grant. So if you scroll to the bottom of that link, you can find the grant manual, the application link, and in about a day or 2, the recording of this webinar. I think that answers the next question too about the application link. It's right at the bottom of that link there. Do you have a resource identified for application assistance? Technically, no, but I am here to help with any questions or any assistance with your application. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to email me and we can set up a time to meet and talk through. I cannot help you with your application, but I can give you some advice and guidance as far as the application goes.
And I'll just jump on that. If you have an active SBIR, you will have successfully completed a much more stringent application than this application. So I have full faith and confidence in anyone that has an active SBIR and went through that process being able to submit this application.
Yeah, great point, Nora. Again, most of the application is kind of just entering information about your company and your SBIR grant. And then there's those 6 questions as well as a proposal document to upload. So not nearly as strenuous as a full SBIR STTR package. Roughly how many SBIR phase 1 and phase 2 grants are active in New Mexico in any given year? That I do not know. I think maybe where there would be a resource.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't really know that, right? Because these are federal grants, so the state isn't a fiscal agent for these. And it's not the match funding isn't, it's still based on those who apply. So could be folks who are getting SBRs who are not applying for the match funding. That's a great question, but we unfortunately wouldn't be the clearinghouse for that data.
Is there a template for the proposal? I don't think there's one on the website for this proposal. We kind of left it up to the discretion of the companies for this one. But again, if you have questions on it, please feel free to reach out and we can discuss.
Well, I think, Michael, sorry, I think actually, yes, because there's an application that it'll walk you through a question, like it'll walk you through questions that we ask you to answer and tell you which documents to upload. So it's not just a sort of free for all. There is an application to follow that is your proposal.
Right. Maybe Curtis, if you could, were you talking about for the proposal document you upload or for the grant application itself?
Oh, okay. My bad.
I wasn't sure which one.
Well, I don't know because I've never done it before. What I'd like to know is if there's something to look at so we can understand what your expectations are. And then if there's a way to iterate on it before it's uploaded to make sure that we have a polished version in the system.
So not in that regard, no.
Well, I would recommend, going and opening the application, right, first, because then you'll see everything that is asked of it, and you can iterate on that as much as you want until it's due for submission.
Okay, great, perfect. So I can I can see the questions beforehand, answer them separately, use Grammarly, and then drop them back in. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So once you open up the application, the very first section has some bullet points kind of on how to move through the application, how to save everything, how to make sure, you can just get through the entire application first without answering anything, get all your responses done, and then go ahead and put everything in at a later time.
So you guys talked about having tasks and milestones. So do we need to, so for instance, in the situation where we want to hire lawyers and things like that, do we need to have identified all those people and be able to list them before we put up the application? Or can we list that as part of the task to do once we got the grant?
So you don't need to have the specific lawyer or, specific law firm you're using for the application. You can keep the topic itself kind of blank as, patent fees or whatever services they're doing for you. But we do want details on, the amount you're expecting that to cost and the time frame it's looking to complete it, whether it's, maybe December to January, December to, the full extent of the grant or anything like that. But as far as specifics for the entity you're working with, we don't need that yet.
Okay.
Once, if you are awarded a grant, we'll follow back kind of and get a little bit more detailed of a budget and things from you at that time. But for the first application, no. Or for the initial application, sorry.
Do you have attorneys and whatnot that you would recommend for those of us that are really green?
We are not we are not able to recommend any agencies or lawyers to work with as a state entity. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
All right, let's move on. Let's see. It'll be kind of tough for us to spend 70% in New Mexico for the kinds of activities we need to do for commercialization. Our potential customers, the ones likely to buy our products, are out of state. How can we spend 70% in state? If we do customer visits, these will be out of state. So
you're reading the numbers flipped.
Oh, am I reading the numbers flipped?
No, not you. To the commenter. Ergotech. It's you have to certify that at least 51% of the activities conducted under the federal award are performed in New Mexico, and that at least 31% of the state funds are in New Mexico.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be 70% New Mexico. You're getting the ratio flipped.
Okay. 30% in New Mexico for the state funds, 50% for the SBIR STTR,
Yeah.
which hopefully is reasonable to do for that kind of activity. And that's between all the different categories. So that's not like 31% of each, task you give us has to be done. For the overall grant, 31% of funds used needs to be used within the state of New Mexico. All right, I think I've gotten to the bottom. I think we answered, let's see. If we have multiple SBIRs that overlap 2 different years, should we list them all for this application or save at least one of them for the following year? Does listing multiple count in our favor? Can we apply again next year? Please list all current or past for, I think going back to 2017 is what we ask. Any SBIR or STTR awards funded during that time frame. It does not necessarily count in your favor or against you, and you are welcome to apply again next year, either for a different grant, or if you have, for example, a phase 1 that is moved to a phase 2 within that cycle for our next grant, you are also welcome to apply again under that new phase 2 grant for the same SBIR.
But just to add on to that, we do want you to, if you have multiple SBIRs, like Michael said, there's a question in the application that asks you to list SBIRs that the entity has received since 2017. But we're asking you need to specify which SBIR you are applying for a match grant to. It can't just be I have 4 active SBIRs and I want general funds. You need to specify which one, how this pairs with what the work going on in the SBIR is to advance XYZ.
Correct. Yeah. So there's a question towards the beginning of the sections that asks for any phase 1, phase 2 SBIR, STTR funding received going back to 2017, where you can list all of them. Then there will be a question in the actual SBIR, STTR section to fill out that will ask you which SBIR, STTR you are applying for this grant for. So you need to apply for one grant for the application. We have a question for Sang. Would you consider PV materials and design engineering technologies for improved efficiency and durability as advanced energy? What is the technology it's being used for? Could you go into a little more detail on that?
Yeah, that will be a yes, Michael.
Yeah,
that would be a yes.
Photovoltaic. Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the response.
All right, and then it looks like Michael, you have your hand up again.
No, sorry, I forgot to
Or is
take
that
it
just
down.
saying there? Gotcha. Okay. All right. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Nora, but I think that's it for the questions. If anyone has any final questions, we'll stick around for a little bit. But if you don't have any more questions, then that would be the end of our webinar. Thank you for joining us, and we appreciate the great turnout and looking forward to seeing your applications come through. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a question from Angel.
Hi, I had asked the question about the resource because I do SBIR grant application assistance, and so I just wanted to make sure if you had a partner already. Also, if you wanted to share that your local minority business development agency could give referrals to patent attorneys and things like that. I don't know if that's a resource that you want to share. I work for the Denver Business Center for the Minority Business Development Agency under a grant to help businesses with these types of things. So that's a resource you could share with them. And then
Great.
the GovCon Alliance also has qualified resources for these TABA, and then so does the LARTA Institute, and they're all qualified agencies. If you wanted to share resources with the people who attended today.
Yeah, we could definitely do something like that maybe, or
would you like me to email
definitely.
that information to you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, feel free to send that to Michael. We do a lot of sort of directing of folks to, you know, ecosystem organizations who can make those referrals. So happy to make sure that the ones you have are on our list as well.
Great. And I don't directly benefit from that. Like I said, I work through a federal grant to help businesses with these services. So.
Oh, great.
Awesome.
I appreciate that. Yeah. If you want to send me an email, with some of that information, and maybe we could also send up a quick meeting, so I could learn a little bit more about that myself. I would appreciate that.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
then I had another question. The company that I'm helping that has a SBIR right now, they're headquartered in New Mexico, but they're working in a laboratory in Colorado. And so I think that would automatically disqualify them because all of their SBIR activities are happening in Colorado.
Yes. If none of the activities are going to be performed in New Mexico, then that would disqualify them.
Okay. Is that always a requirement on this matching grant? Is there any other cycles that hasn't been a requirement?
Nora, do you want to maybe speak to that?
Yeah, no, that's always going to be a requirement of this one just because these are state funds, right? So the intent is to foster business development and activity in the state of New Mexico.
Sure. Yeah, they're an Albuquerque company. They just didn't have access to the laboratory resources down there to do their research. So.
Okay. Well, I mean, feel free to connect us with them for that because we can be helpful in that sense as well. Obviously, no guarantees, but we do a lot of that connecting as well.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Awesome. Sure thing.
Thanks. Give it maybe just another minute until it's 1:40, and then we'll go ahead and close things out.
I have a question related to the previous one.
Yes.
So our company's 2/3 in New Mexico, but on one of the SBIRs in particular, half of it is being done by someone who lives outside of New Mexico. So I don't know exactly offhand how the finances are split. It's roughly 50% of the funding is in Colorado, 50% is here. But 2/3 of the staff are here and 2/3 of the work is done here. It's just which work we have funded.
So
we do a lot of
real
work.
quick, when you say 2/3, just because, we're talking about 66%.
Yeah, there's 3 of us that are all working towards this. We got an SBIR that covers some of our development costs, and we split the funding between our partner there and then 2 of us here. So roughly 50% of the funding's in New Mexico, 50%'s in Colorado. I don't know the exact, if it hits exactly 51 here versus there, but we definitely have majority employees in New Mexico.
Yeah, I would say go ahead and apply. If you're kind of right around that 51%, we can maybe down the line get a little bit deeper into that to figure out, maybe the exact amount or what that looks like. But for the 66% of payroll being within the state is good for the grant. So if you want to also maybe just follow up with me on a quick email, or maybe we can hop on a quick meeting to discuss, just to kind of dive into that a little bit deeper.
Okay, that'd be great.
All right. Well, if there's no further questions, I think we'll go ahead and get everything closed out here. Again, thank you everyone for joining today. And we look forward to seeing your applications come through in the next 2 weeks. Have a great day, everyone.